Hello, Steelers, and welcome to this very special interview video I've got here. I've got a housewife's favourite to my left, my right, whichever it is on the screen there, Mr. Dave. Or is it Dave or David Brown? Which do you prefer, David, or either or?
I don't mind whatever you like, Alex. Just thank you very much for having me.
No worries. He's the, as I'm sure if you're watching this, you probably already know, he's the writer of General d'Armée or General d'Armée 2 rules that just come out. Well, just come out a year ago. We're going to talk about that. But it's also O Group as well, which is one of my favourite sets of rules as well. So it's a real pleasure to have you on the channel, Dave. Do you want to do a quick introduction for yourself? And you don't have to tell us how you got into wargaming.
In that case, then, I'm Dave Brown, and I'll write some rules.
There you go. Yeah, you've been writing rules for quite a long time, haven't you? I actually only found out the other day you did, was it Panzer Grenadier? I think is an old
Panzer Grenadier. Yeah,
that's right.
Panzer Grenadier, General de Brigade, and Guns at Gettysburg were the first kind of tranche of rule writing.
You've also got Pickett's Charge, one of yours as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's quite a vast array of stuff, isn't it? I've been looking for the Panzer Grenadier, but you can't find it, unfortunately, apart from very expensive second hand. And I don't think you're worth that much, Dave.
Are you sure?
We'll see. It is payday today, so maybe I might splash out.
There you go.
But the reason I want you to come on the channel and have a chat is, I'm a big fan of your games anyway. I've been recently playing General d'Armée 2, relatively recent. I mean, it's been out for a year or so. I've kind of we played it since it came out. I played it on the club, but I've been playing it with my collection of stuff that I've only managed just recently managed to get together for decent games of it, because it takes a lot of figures, doesn't it? Well, it can do anyway.
It can do, yeah.
Yeah, it can do. So it's been out for about a year or so now, hasn't it? And then, as I say, as a Napoleonic game, I think I really rate it. I don't want to blow smoke up your ass here, but what's the other reactions been to GDA2 over this last year? You've had now a year for it to kind of bed in, I guess, haven't you?
Yeah. It's like all things, isn't it? When you first kick off a project and decide to go down a slightly different route, you're always very conscious of the fact it might go down like the proverbial lead balloon. Because one of the things I try to do is to push certain boundaries and not just follow kind of standard war game rules design, whatever that for whatever that is. So there's always a bit of trepidation when it is first released, as you would expect. But fortunately, I think most people were certainly on board with it. Obviously, you always get a percentage that prefer, the first edition of the rules, which is to be expected. That's fine.
Yeah.
But the vast majority,
I suppose, that isn't it? Really?
It's you get the usual thing. Yeah, you get the usual thing, don't you? With its change. Right, so you're going to get resistance and all that hate, anger, and then oh god, okay, we'll play it then. But now it's gone down very well. Fortunately, it's always helped by having a good online community. So we've got the Lardy forums are there to assist. You've got the Facebook groups. I think there's about 3. One main one, Australian one. And one other. So any issues that people have, they can jump on board there. And I think that's what it's all about. Once you understand where it's coming in from, you get over all those initial hurdles. It's settled down very well.
Oh, that's good. And have you seen it draw in a lot of new players? I'm a new player to that particular level of Napoleonic gaming, at least.
Yeah, well, my only guide to that is in response to forum and Facebook questions. And what I have noticed is a lot of new people, or certainly people I don't recognise from the previous edition, are all popping up asking questions, or asking about army organisation, etc. So I think definitely there are there's the old grognards, as they are still there, but it's also I think attracted a good number of new players, which is great.
It's nice to see that. And like you say, if you're not recognising the names and the faces, and you're definitely onto a winner, aren't you? And it is a very active forum. So I'm in the Facebook group for GDA 2, and there is always questions about things, people asking stuff. So there are people obviously playing it and continuing to play it as well. Sometimes I think games can be released and then they can be quickly forgotten, can't they? And it's so it's nice to see it, even like I say, even a year on, really. And so, what really prompted that new edition? Because I mean, when was GDA originally published, the first one? I don't know. There you go. I'll put you on the spot there. That's not on your notes, is it?
No, it's not on. Hang on, my notes here. No, I should have. Oh, God, you've caught me out. I don't know, which Clark might have. I think it was GDA. It was 7 years. Was a GDA 2. So about what are we now? So 2018, somewhere around there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So about that mark.
But what was it then that prompted the
yes. So
your need to update it, or that it wasn't a need, a desire, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's many aspects, but I mean, one of which is just that you've had 7 years of gaming it, and you think I could do that bit better.
Yeah.
You think, or you've had exposure to other rule sets where. Obviously, what you don't do is you don't slavishly copy or plagiarize other rule sets, but they get you thinking down a different route.
Of course,
so you play other games and you think, well, that's a different way of doing things, and then that opens a door in your thinking about how you do stuff. And then it's just new research, a bit more reading. You pick up new stuff, and you think, oh, you could include that, and then you get people that. Like that Clark fellow that you had on previously, and he always mentioned a very pertinent remark, which is unusual for him, which is
he's probably not watching. Don't worry about it. Say what you want.
So he mentioned about the fact that by having constant reference to the rule book, you're dragged away from the game and the narrative. And I think that's hitting the nail on the head there. So it was a combination of all those things. It was having played it for 7 years, you think I can do this better and tweak things in a different way. Rich Clark saying, right, do things in a different way rather than tables and modifiers and constant referring to the chart. Let's try to do things in a different way. And just picking up new stuff as you go along.
I mean, again, I don't want to give him too much praise here, but yes, I think Rich has it on the nail on the head there. You're playing a game, aren't you? You don't really want to be. It's not a library. I say that, to friends when we're playing games. It's like, sometimes, even if you don't know the rules, sometimes I'll just roll the dice and it's 1 to 3 is your interpretation, 4 to 6 is yours. Let's just keep the game moving. And I think the rules writers can definitely learn from that, and I think that's definitely something that people should think about, really. So how much influence then did speaking about Richard, how much influence did he have actually in the development of GDA 2? Did he have much, or was he just kind of like
none at all?
None at all.
Why on earth would that matter? He's far too thoroughly into cock. So no, hang on, that came out a bit wrong. So, but he's far too into his chain of command. So, what Rich is very good, and obviously Nick is they're very good at just bringing up the odd question that then triggers all your thinking. So it was just that idea about less reference to charts, less reference to the rule book that triggered the whole. One of the challenge that we set ourselves, the boy and I, was to get rid of all maths in the modifiers. So if you look at GDA 2, there's no +1, +2, +3, -1 for this, -1 for that. And that was a conscious decision following on from what the good Mr. Clark had talked about. And that was a desire to make rules more intuitive. So although they might still be there, so you create the Napoleonic feeling, the nuance, and the Napoleonic tactics, you don't have to continually look at. You just go, as you've just said, it's roller dice, isn't it? Oh
Yeah.
yeah, we're rolling dice for skirmishers, and we add or take dice off, which is a much more visible, easier system to do.
Yeah.
Than I can remember, it's going back now, admittedly, but the skirmish fire was by musketry, so you'd have to count up the number of figures and then go through one of those classic charts of cover +1 range, British rifles, have cleaned your musket this morning -2. And it's all about coming away from that, which puts you in the book, your head in the book through, and hopefully trying to make it more intuitive. So
yeah. Well, it certainly works. I mean, it does. I've played a handful of games of GDA 2 at this moment, and I kind of want to play more of it because I enjoyed every game. But it is, you feel as though you pick up those rules very quickly as a new player, and it is very intuitive, like you're saying. I think. And that's the thing, isn't it? We've moved on from charts and things, and there's some people out there that absolutely love them. Of course there are.
Where's that Ed Riley bloke? He loves his
the action gamer. I mean, he just bangs on about him. He's in his hobby room. His walls are just covered in charts and things. It's like, it's my worst nightmare. But I'm more in your camp where it's like I'd rather just count up a big bag of dice and throw those. And it's also satisfying, I think, as well, isn't it? Chucking a load of dice.
You're right. Oddly enough, it's not only easier, but it is just more fun.
Yeah.
If you start with a hand of, say, whatever, it doesn't matter, whatever game you're playing. I start with 6 dice and I lose one because you're in cover. For some unknown reason, that's just, it feels better than going on -1. I don't know, but it just does.
Yeah, absolutely. It can. You feel a little bit more as though you're actually in the game as well, in a weird way. I think you feel like you're actually you're part of it. You mentioned him. Go on, sorry.
I was just going to follow on from that. It's the thing, isn't it? Because if you think about being involved in the game, at no stage do any officer or in command of anything look through a chart to see if they can get +1 when they're storming this German machine gun position, on the Normandy beaches.
Yeah, exactly. Just to pick up that, you mentioned the boy, Chris.
Yeah.
It's the first time that, well, at least the first time I know that his name has been on a set of your rules. I'm sure he's probably had input in other rules before, but how much did he have in this one in particular? His name is emblazoned there on the front. So
only did let the boy come in to appease him. He has 3 very useful functions, so he is pretty good. So he's obviously he's a gamer in his own right. But so he does 2 things. Because he did a maths degree and beyond, I could just go to him and go, right, what is +2 as a modifier? Right. So express that in dice or in re-rolls or anything. And he could go away and he'd do it, and he'd come away and come back and he'd go, right, well, if you +2, a re-roll on the dice is equivalent to about +1.5. So is that where you want to be? And you go, yeah, okay, +1.5 is fine.
Yeah,
I'll have a re-roll. So I could throw all those issues at him, all that probability. What's the probability of, a double 6 of scoring X, Y, or Z? And he'd just go, it's that. What if I add another dice to it? How does that influence the outcome and all that? And then, of course, he has his own mind, so we can sort of have cross ideas, and I can go, I think we want to go down this route, and he would come back and go, that's rubbish, that is. I go, okay. But he was very good at coming back with an alternative suggestion,
right,
as opposed to just criticism. It was, well, you look at it from a different angle. Of many times, isn't it? You should just reverse whatever you were thinking of and go to the other end of the spectrum and attack it from the other end. And sometimes you'll achieve the same result, but better. That's what Christopher is very good at.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, it's like your own feedback forum, isn't it? That
Yes, yeah, it's very good.
not
And then
afraid to
obviously
tell you
it was
or hurt
playing
your
games.
feelings.
Yes, yeah. Get the troops. There's also get the troops on the table, play a game, and then you've got that automatic kind of back and forth feedback, discussion, etc., etc. You know, once all the crying had finished after I'd defeated him and ground his forces into the dirt.
Competitive dad much?
No, not really.
Just put him in his place. That's all it is, isn't it? It's like a smack on the nose with a newspaper.
He's bigger than me now, so I have to be careful.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? All right, so let's have a think about the historical side of stuff, because you touched on it a little bit there, and I mean, one of the things I like a lot about O Group is the emphasis on the history of the Second World War that came through, and I think, and do you want to talk a little bit more about that? You know, what are you looking at with O Group and also with GDA 2 as well? It's a bit of a discussion.
Yeah.
You can separate them up as much as you want, or combine them. I mean, what were you looking for to tease out a history when it comes to those two particular sets of rules?
Basically, I'll go to my copious notes here.
He's prepared, ladies and gentlemen. He's prepared.
One of the main aspects is to encourage and put in decision making into a game. So there are many war games out there that war game rules that are often simply an outlet to allow people to put their nicely painted armies on the tabletop, and that's really their function. And the history is simply gathered from the troops, and the rules are very sort of bland, average rules, supported by the period of the troops. So if I'm bunging Napoleonics on the dice, I move my battalion into yours, I get a 4+. Well, I've defeated you. And it doesn't, but it allows you to get the army onto the table. Whereas, and it's those figures that create the history. So if you've got British redcoats, then you're in, at Waterloo or wherever you are.
Yeah.
Whereas I wanted to have not only just the figures on the table to create my history, but I also wanted the rules to actively create that history as well.
Okay.
So it was a question of those making those decisions that potentially generals of the day had to make, or company commanders, wherever you were, had to make, and take some of those that we've all read about and we've all come across in various accounts and try to put them into the rules.
Yeah.
So it's less about factors, less about weapons, and it's more about the men, the morale, and the decisions that they have to make.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a question of if you looked at, for instance, you've got GDA and O Group. So if you take an example from each, so if you look at General Darmay, take Ney at Waterloo, the decisions he was making as far as orders were concerned, well, he only had one order, and that was Napoleon said, take those forces, go and attack the British and the Allies and defeat them. He didn't have any other orders, but what he had were tactical decisions. So it's how does he deploy the artillery? How does he use the artillery? How does he deploy, if you, for instance, D'Erlon's, French formations? How does he deploy that? That one of his decision-making process was clearly, well, we've been hammered in Spain every time we've gone up against the British. So how do we overcome this issue at Waterloo? Hence, that's why D'Erlon's formation was most likely put into effect. And then when it all went wrong, when it all goes wrong, what other decisions does Ney do? Well, Ney then releases some of the heavy cavalry to try and stave off defeat. So it's all about those decisions. O Group is similar. It's about allowing the player, or giving the player the opportunity to make those kind of faster time decisions down in the dirt. So if you're a battalion commander, you know you've got your orders. Your orders are to go and take village X on this phase line. You kick off at 0600 hours and away you go. Well, the fast time decisions for him are, what company am I going to put up front? What company's in reserve? What support assets have I got, and how am I going to use them? Do I keep them in reserve? Do I put them up front? And it's all those sort of things. How do I incorporate the battalion mortars into the process? Am I using smoke? Am I using HE? It's all those sort of things that commanders at the time, isn't it? 'Cause if you read accounts of the people, attacking up and beyond the Normandy beaches on the Odin and all those sort of places, they're not very often going on about, I get a +3 because my machine gun's got a higher rate of fire than yours. They are simply saying, I needed to get smoke down to protect ourselves from a potential German machine gun position. And that's the decision making. It's, we're being attacked, we're bringing smoke. We're being attacked. How do I respond to that? Do I go somewhere else? Do I deploy my fire teams to counter it? Do I storm it?
Yeah.
And it's taking those decisions that people have and trying to put them into a war game and trying to recreate that as best you can. It doesn't always work. Yeah. It's not warfare, and you're certainly not under the pressure they were under by any means. But it's having a foot, in that area of decision making.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That's where it comes from. It's the command decisions, isn't it? That add to the complexity of the game, I think. And again, is that something that you were trying to tease out of historical accounts? Definitely. So when you're reading various accounts, I mean, this is another thing that Clark has mentioned that he picked up from, I think it was Paddy Griffiths, is what's called tactical snippeting, isn't it? So when you're reading an account, you come across one or two things in a book that are really focused in, and you think, oh, right, that's it. That's how, they did that. That's how they responded to cavalry, or that's how they dealt with, German tanks or whatever it is. And it's taking those out, then formulating them into a rule in a war game that kind of works. Yeah. And then, of course, you spend half your life playtesting it and modifying it because it's too complicated, or war gamers go, well, I'm not doing that. It's stupid, I'm doing all this stuff. But that's where it's that tactical snippeting. And I've got some of these other things, isn't it? Stuff like, if you look at that, it's documents of the time. So that is your infantry training, fieldcraft, battle drill section of platoon tactics from 1944. Well, O Group was based on a lot of these. Yeah. A lot of these books. You've got one on the 2-inch mortar, one on how the carrier platoon was organised. And you can't really go too far wrong. That although you're not, it's not a slavish replica, in the game of those manuals, but it's harking back to those manuals. And one of the things that did come out in those manuals was the constant reference in the British Army battalion in World War II, the constant reference to reserves. It was always about whatever level you're fighting at, you have a reserve. Yeah. So whether it's brigade, battalion, company, section, a platoon, whatever, you have a reserve. So that's why O Group concentrates a lot on reserves. And it's the use of those reserves that then hit another area of, plausibility or realism, whatever you want to call it. That's the fog of war and denying intelligence to the enemy. If you haven't got troops on the table, the player doesn't know what you're doing, and he can't see where everything is. And they can't get shot either, can they? That's the other thing as well on top of that, there's a lot of pluses to it, really. So they can't see what's going on. They don't necessarily even know what you've got.
it's a war game, so they've probably read the scenario.
Yeah,
but it all adds to it. It adds to
Yeah.
that thing. I don't know. I'm not too sure what you've got or when it's coming on or where it's coming on. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? In combat, most people down in the dirt have no idea what's happening or certainly what the enemy are up to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one. They probably don't even know what their own army are doing. Never mind what the guys on the other side of the wire are doing. But yeah, this is one of the things that when I put on a group for new players and things, I've always said hold on to your reserves as long as you can, because like you say, once you start committing them, even putting troops on at the start of the game, trying to do that as minimum as possible is the way to go, because that's not what armies were doing. And if you're kind of following history, and I think there's a tendency. You probably found this with our group in particular. There's probably a tendency for wargamers to shove as much stuff on the table immediately.
Yeah.
And, it's like, well, I've got my toys. I want to play with them. I want them on the table. And it takes a big step to step back from that, doesn't it? And go like, well, so how do you nudge a player in that way with something like our group?
Well, it's by... it's doing two things. So if you've got in O group, it's by allowing players to deploy reserves with benefits, if you can use that expression. So it's
with benefits.
So, under many other systems, isn't it? A reserve would be of no value to you because it would arrive at the back, it's not in range, and it would plod 6 inches a turn trying to get to wherever it needs to go, and it never got there or nothing. So you need to incorporate into the rules a reason to have a reserve and then a benefit. So in O group, it's about the consolidation. So if you capture a phase 1 objective or an objective or any objective on the field where you think, actually, that's a good place to consolidate and bring in my reserves, you literally deploy on that position. So that's doing two things. It's encouraging the player to keep a reserve. B, it gives him a benefit in the game, because otherwise, why would you bother? Suddenly you've got a potential company exploiting a situation that you've managed to create, perhaps punch a hole in a line, and suddenly there's more and more troops pouring through. Well, that to me is a much more plausible outcome to a battle than having a reserve plod on, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches a turn, where the opponent just looks at it and goes, "Oh yeah, look, he's marching up that way. I'll just deploy over there. It's not a problem."
I'm defeating him in piecemeal here. It doesn't matter.
And it's the same in GDA 2. It was a question of reserves are important and should hold an advantage. It's basically, isn't it, the person who commits their last reserve before the opponent is probably losing. So it's have reserves, have them at the back, but give them a big bonus when they hit the table. I can even remember reading an article by some chap once online, I think it was, and it was about deploying cavalry in the Napoleonic Wars. So they should come onto the table and they should have an immediate impact. His suggestion was that they could arrive anywhere along your board edge and attack immediately. So a cavalry charge would be one big surprise, but that was it. That was your lot. Once you committed them, they were on. And that was an interesting way of looking at it. I thought, I'm not sure many wargamers would accept that. 1 minute you're merrily, deployed in line, having a much. The next minute there's a million cuirassiers descending on it. Looking at it, talking about that, it's probably more realistic. But no wargamer will accept that.
No, they wouldn't. I don't think that'd be thrown out. That'll be a house ruled out.
We're not having that.
We don't use that.
It's all about that, isn't it? So deny information and intelligence to the opponent and give yourself an advantage, which reserves work.
Well, this is a good point. Actually, I mean, I've played GDA 2 a few times. Obviously, I know the importance of reserves in O group, but can you give me some hints on how to use my reserves in GDA 2 for the next time, so I can smash my cuirassiers into their line when they're least expecting it?
Yes, it's the It's not dissimilar, but in Napoleonics, isn't it, and O group, it's generally either a cavalry reserve or an infantry reserve, and you've probably only got one. You might have two.
Yeah.
Rather than a potential drip effect, as World War II, you can feed in reserves or go for the big consolidation. GDA is about the one big attack using your reserves,
right?
And that is flinging it on at the right. Anyone can say this, but it's true. It's right place, right time, and use all the CNC taskings or forward taskings to get them moving quickly.
Yes, of course.
So I can remember one game, isn't it, where we released, I think it was French cavalry. So they had Polish lancers and a hussar unit. And by using one of the CNC taskings and forwards or combined, they moved about 50 centimeters onto the table on that turn.
Wow.
So immediately the other player was completely caught out. His battalions were in the wrong formation.
Right.
And he had one turn to react as opposed to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 turns.
Yeah, they could probably see this cavalry line coming towards them, but otherwise it's right on top of them. Yeah.
So that's what to do, isn't it? And it's the same as World War II. What you're trying to do in the Napoleonic war game is get the opponent to commit all their reserves before you commit yours, so you can see how the battle develops. It's watching how the battle develops and going, right. And obviously the reverse is if you're forced to commit the reserves to shore up defeat, then you think, it's not going very well, but at least I made one flag out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, well, that's not. It's Napoleon at Waterloo, isn't it? It's used all of Labal's corps, 6 corps, all the young guard and all the old guard to shore off defeat and not achieve victory.
Yes, at that point, he's holding his line, isn't it? Right then.
Yeah. So if you're feeding in your reserves just to hold the line, you're not going to win the battle. You
haven't got the momentum, have you?
Yeah.
And I think this is something, I think it's probably a little more pertinent right down the bottom levels with O group as well, because you've got the combat patrols, haven't you, which are your deployment points, but they're also acting as scouts and they're also acting as that fog of war as well. You don't really have that in GDA 2 because of the difference of the games anyway.
There was a temptation to do something like that in GDA, but we all know Napoleonics is a slightly different method of warfare. It was slower and perhaps a little more obvious, but if it just, I can remember one discussion, or it was a first-hand account from someone at Waterloo, and it was about visibility. And they literally were saying they were a French skirmisher down at Papelot, attacking, I think they were Belgium or Nassauers, and they were firing over a lane. So, I don't know how wide a lane is, not very wide at all. But he says, so if you're firing at about 50 or less yards, he said the whole lane was filled with their black powder smoke. So he couldn't see where they were. He just returned fire when he saw a muzzle flash.
Right.
So to take that forward, we thought, well, obviously at a certain stage in the battle, visibility becomes a real issue and you don't know what's going on and you can't see. So it was a question of, okay, we'll then allow reserves to come on blinds and be completely hidden until they attack. But then, of course, that clashes with the wargamers' desire to win the battle, and it's not fair that you charged your cuirassiers off that blind because my men were in line and I wasn't ready to receive them. And you had all sorts of issues and discussions and tantrums. People saying this is rubbish. I don't see those cuirassiers a mile off. So, in World War II, you can kind of get away with it. You can say it's just it's a section of men. They're down in the dirt. They're hidden. Not a problem. But when you've got 3,000 cuirassiers with highly polished armor rumbling up on horses, it's slightly harder to do.
It is, but I still think there's still that fog of war as well, though, isn't there? I mean, misidentification of units, and that, to go back to Waterloo, which no, it was Quatre Bras and Ligny, wasn't it, where there was the French corps marching between the two.
D'Erlon.
D'Erlon's corps, wasn't it? Yeah. And then also even when the Prussians arrive at Waterloo, there's are they French or are they Prussian? They can't make them out until they're clashing, basically, can they?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. It will never, as far as figures the game is concerned, we'll never overcome that, because we know exactly. We're very, very good at troop recognition.
Yes.
We'll just go, oh, those are Dutch Belgians, aren't they? Oh, yeah, they'll be rubbish, or whatever. Or you immediately go, oh, my God, right, that's the old guard. I mean, the classic World War II is soldiers, even now, their ability to recognize enemy armor is rubbish.
Yeah.
I can remember doing exercises where we would have, we'd just have pictures up of tanks, and you had to, and it would be lots of flashing and banging, and then you had to make a quick identification and write it down and come at the other end. And we would put things on like a Sherman just to mess it up. And they would go, and it would come out, and they go, "Oh yeah, that's one of ours, isn't it? Is that a Challenger? Is that a Challenger, isn't it?" Go, no, it's not a Challenger.
It was one of ours, but 50 years ago.
And there's a brilliant one from, again, Normandy, where some officer, they've just captured a village, and the British infantry have settled down, getting a brew on, as you do, and he's having his fag, he's having a brew, and he went, it was a hard fight, and now at last we were being relieved by our tanks. And as the tanks drove into the village, he was describing them, and he was going, "God, look at them, they're fabulous. They'll never defeat us. Now look at that lovely sloped armor, those really long guns. Oh, they're great." And it wasn't until the column had gone past that he then noticed that some of the insignias were German, and there were German troops riding on the back of the tank. At which point he went, "Shit, I'm
in the wrong place."
But a war gamer will instantly know. They'll go, "Oh, Panther G. I know exactly what gun it's got. I know exactly what its capacity is, its speed. It's fun. You can't overcome it."
There is one way around it, and I have seen it at a game that was at the conventions a few years ago. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you before, but the base of the game was you were a Sherman tank commander in Normandy in '44, and you started in the centre of and German tanks were coming in at you. But every single German tank that came at you was a Tiger, no matter what, because you just couldn't recognise what it was. And it was only when it got so close that they revealed what the actual tank was. But that had to be done with an umpire, and it had that's impossible to do on a war game, like you say, because.
Yeah, we tried that, and I think I might have mentioned that in Panzer Grenadier. One of the other is to replace whatever tank you have with the most generic model for the army until it opens fire. But of course, once it opens fire, all the players then know. They'll go, "Oh, what's its armor value?" And you can't then go, "Oh, well, don't worry about it," because if their tank gets knocked out, they're going to be somewhat upset. But so once it opened fire, you could take off your Panzer IV and put the Panther on, and then they go, "Oh God, they're Panthers."
We just misidentified them.
Yeah,
but I mean, like you say, it happens these days. It will have happened all the time. Especially in the and even back in Napoleonic times, and even all the way back to ancient times, it's got to be misidentifying the enemy. But how do you recreate that on the tabletop or virtually?
People, it's was it friendly fire, isn't it? It was supposed to be about 1 in 3. I can remember. I can. The whole thing's a nightmare, and it's fraught with difficulty for wargaming. I can remember being on an exercise once where we were firing at it's basically a screen of enemy troops coming through a village. and we were a fire team, and we just put fire down on them. When we saw them, there was smoke, guns and explosions. And I can remember the last bit of the exercise before the film finished, because you're just firing at this screen and it registered hits. All these troops came roaring in from the right. So I just opened up on them with a few rounds. And then they went, okay, right, it's all over. And they said to me, oh, yeah, that was a really good exercise until you opened fire on your own reinforcing platoon as they came in at the end. They all look the same.
Yeah, how can I tell? Yeah. Brilliant.
So if you were to take that forward into ancients, you would have things like Greek mercenaries fighting some other mercenary. You'd have no idea whether they're actually on the enemy side, other than the fact they might actually be opposite you, that you wouldn't speak the same language. So you'd have no idea. We do, because we go, oh, well, they're Persian infantry. Those are Greek hoplites. They're obviously in Napoleonic Wars. Everyone's got an oil-skin covered shako, a great coat, which is probably pretty dirty, and some trousers and a backpack. So how do you know who they are until someone says something?
Well-painted figures are not what is represented on the actual field of battle, are they, at all?
We can go down the line and go, oh, those foot guards. And you go, yeah, they've got nice flags, and they're foot guards.
Exactly. So really then, I mean, with that in mind, speaking of like, the military aspects of things and how you get that on the tabletop, how do you create that good balance between what could potentially be a very dry military simulation or just a fun and enjoyable game that you could play in an evening? I mean, you want maybe a bit of both, or
I think so. I've done dry military simulations. Most of which involve the Three Shock Army trying to push towards the Rhine, and they are a bit boring. They're just this happens, that happens at this time. And they're not great. They're not great war games. And it is that exact. If you go too far down, my particular avenue, you get just to a bland war game where it doesn't really matter. You just push two armies together, you roll some dice, and whoever rolls the highest wins. But it has no. You've not actually done anything. It's not presented you with any. Challenges or anything. So it's about you've got to take interesting command decisions and work that into a mechanism that becomes entertaining and people want to do it, and it gives them a challenge, but not too much of a challenge. And one of the things I've gradually got there, not as quickest of duct tape, but gradually got there, is the fact that the way one way of doing that is to make your command decisions more nuanced and detailed, but make the shooty movie morale stuff much simpler. So it literally on the Ancients, the set of rules that is now being worked on, everything's pretty much 4+, which is where O Group was and where we were looking to do that in GDA2. So all your base mechanics, like the weapons to hit, etc., is roll a dice, and most of the players know I'll roll a handful of dice, and what I need are 4s or more. If I roll 1, 2, or 3, it's a fail. So all that is simple. But the complicated bit, or the more in-depth section, are the command decisions. So there's much more emphasis on those command decisions to make you think, to present challenges to you, from all the things we've touched on about reserves, etc. That's the difficult bit, or the harder bit, and that's your simulation. So simulation sits in command and control. Simulation has been completely removed from the bog standard shooting. Just at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your mechanism is. You've either caused some damage on the enemy, you've done some shock or whatever you want to call it, you've done a casualty. It's irrelevant. You've either done it or you haven't. And how you get there doesn't really matter. It's all the other stuff that went around it. that does it.
I think that's a massive shift, isn't it, in wargaming in general, really, towards that kind of abstraction of the weapon size. And I personally, I prefer that command decision being the complexity of the rules, because in GDA and also in O Group, you don't have all the tools in the toolbox, basically, do you? Because you've only got a certain amount of orders. And one of the things I want to say, one of the things I like a lot about O Group is that when you start the game, and new players find this, you've got all these orders, you're putting them everywhere, you're doing all the stuff you want to do, but about halfway through, everybody's damaged. It's like, do I start rallying? Do I doing this? I just don't have enough to do with the things I want. And that's what I really like about it. And I think, is that something that you were aiming for when you wrote to it? And also GTA as well in the same.
It's about how it's basically, isn't it? It's friction and combat stress start making things become really difficult. Whereas I've played many other war games, and it didn't seem to matter what was the state of your army. You were still just as good at the start as you were at the beginning. And I never thought. Well, I thought, this is clearly not right. And it's a question of saying that as more and more things get hurt, more and more things are dragged into the battle, it becomes harder and harder and harder to do anything. So. To use the analogy, it's a bit like when combat is a bit like, I suppose you could say it's a bit like going swimming. You jump in at the start, and it's not bad.
Let's see where we're going with this, ladies and gentlemen.
But gradually, as the battle is going on, you're getting more and more tired, and the water is slowly becoming thicker and turning into treacle. And if you combine all those things, you just get nowhere. You're getting nowhere, which is, and that's what it's trying to replicate, is that it becomes harder and harder and harder to do stuff. And because you've also suddenly got many more command decisions, isn't it? Do I rally that? Do I deploy here? Do I consolidate there? But if I do that, I can't do that.
I can't do X and Y. Yes, it
is. That's the game aspect of it. And what it's trying to recreate is some poor old battalion commander back at the HQ in his CP going, Christ, do I really speak company? Give me some information. Shouting at people. Get out there. Tell me what's happening with A company.
And then the runner's not coming back, or the telephone there's a million things happening, isn't there?
They've always had the thing on top that is their career. Their careers at stake, ours aren't.
Yes.
So if it all goes wrong, not only do they get people killed, but they're going to get sacked. And no wargamer ever gets sacked.
Losing their figures.
That's right.
But that's the real aspects of the rules that you write. I really do like, and I appreciate it, because it's where the game hangs, isn't it? It's where the interest of the game is, more so than can my KR-98 fire further than your SMLE, or what's the penetrating power of this Panther versus a Sherman.
The same in the ancient rules with all that, isn't it? Really, it was far too much for me emphasis on the weapons. It's a spear. Oh, it's a bit shorter, this one. It's only 6 inches, so so you're not as good. Really?
Well, why are they using them then?
The Gladys is 20 times better because it's a stabby as a slashy slab. Well, quite frankly, I don't think it makes the slightest bit of difference. If you're trained in a weapon, you're going to use it pretty well regardless. It makes no odds. It's all these kind of rules about weapons, and I've got a great big axe, so it must be marvelous. Well, if you've got a great big axe, you haven't got a shield, which means you're vulnerable, sunshine. So if your axe misses, you're in trouble.
That's it. You could take one big swing, but then you're open, aren't you, to attack?
So again, it's all that thing, isn't it? It's less about weapons, the standalone weapons, and it's more about the men, the command, and how those two things come together.
Yeah, I mean, that's another good point as well, isn't it? I mean, you don't really have many different levels. Well, there's a few different levels of troop type in GDA 2, but it's more like, the reflective of their morale, I would have said, more than as much as training as anything else, really. I suppose the two are very similar anyway, but it's more about those men than what kind of musket they're carrying, or how they're individually trained, because they're doing what they're supposed to be doing anyway. But some are going to be more motivated than others, aren't they?
Well, that's what it simply is. It doesn't matter whether you have a Shelville musket or a Brown Bess. No, if you get hit with a musket bolt, it's not going to make a lot of difference.
No, don't take your arm off.
Exactly. It's going to hurt. So why bother? Why? But they, all soldiers, what they do, what all soldiers throughout history do, probably, I suspect, and more recently, is moan about their weapons and reckon the weapons of the enemy are better than theirs. Well, it's never the case, but you always do that because soldiers like to gripe about stuff, don't they? It's weapons are shit. There's a Mars bear. Well, you haven't used them, but how do you know?
It's a story that's as long as the ages, I think, isn't it?
Exactly. Really, I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are. The Greeks would have said, "No, it's not fair. Those Spartans, they've got better shields than we have." It's any excuse, isn't it? It is. It's about training and commitment. And if you are highly motivated troops, and with the right kit, and you're in the right place and ready to go, then that'll make the difference. Where if you're not in the right place, it doesn't matter how well motivated you are. As the old guard found at Waterloo, you can be as motivated as you like, but if there's only 5 battalions up against about 30,000, it's going to make not a lot of difference.
It's going to, strength of numbers in that point, isn't it, really? Or lack of numbers, I guess, at that point. You kind of touched on it a little bit there, the ancient rules. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, just to give us a teaser here. I don't want to, I don't want you to... the Vexillaris is their title. They may probably stick with that, but they've been on working on those for about 3 years. Okay.
So and they are basically now finished, and they've gone out to blind play testing,
right?
And to all the various parties, and just await feedback from that, and then they're kind of ready to go. And it's that they follow the same format as both Pickett's Charge and GDA, and to a certain extent the group, is the fact it's about tactical decisions around managing your battle line, and not very much about weapons, what type of shield you've got, whether you've got a dagger, a bow, a spear, a sword, so I must be better than you because you haven't. It's none of that. It's about maintaining. It's about maintaining the battle line, giving some orders, not a lot of high level orders, trying to maintain that battle line to keep it coherent. Win on the flanks with the cavalry if you can, and then while your centre tries to pin the enemy, and then hopefully envelop. Or if you're the Romans, your cavalry pins theirs, and you try and smash through the centre as quick as you possibly can before your cavalry lose, or something like that. So it's about that. Again, it's about concentrates on command decisions and getting your troops into combat at the right place, right time, and holding the line. So they're all all ready to go.
Right. How do you go about playtesting then? You're down with, is it what's
Loughton.
Your local group?
Loughton.
It's a strike force, isn't it? They call.
They've always been very good. They'll take any rule I hoist upon them. And it's a question of pushing it out, taking it to, so you can push it out to people like Mr. Clark. He'll tell you straight up if something works or if it doesn't, and then play testing with different groups of people who have different ideas and I don't think the way you think. I took them off to the Society of the Ancients. They had a weekend up in Cambridge, or just outside Cambridge. So played a few games with their members just to get a feel for how they enjoyed it.
Right.
And I thought, well, if I can survive a Society of the Ancients weekend, it should be reasonably robust. And that went pretty well. That was all right. So it's just introducing it to different people with different thoughts, who play different rules, who don't think like you do, and then taking on board all the feedback that comes back. So
that's the thing as a games designer, kind of away from what we were talking about. But how do you take on board feedback? I mean, there must be some that comes in where people are dead against something. Do you?
Yeah.
But it's something that you think works. How do you? How does that work? Do you throw some of the
feedback is. Feedback takes about, I think there are 3 different types of feedback that I'm kind of aware of. One is the immediate feedback when you're playing with someone.
Yeah.
If you get that, if you're trying to explain a rule or a system to somebody, and you immediately get that, if you get that jolt where they just don't understand what it is that's happening and why, then you think, well, there's something is wrong there. So you look at that process and think, right, why did that happen? Do it a different way, change it, because it's just jolting. That doesn't work. And the other thing is to be quite up and open. Some people will go, I don't know, whatever. I didn't think that worked very well. Wouldn't it be better if, hoplites just gave ground begrudgingly rather than just broke? And you think about it, and you'll do 2 things. One is explain your thinking, and if they then go, oh, okay, I get it now, that's fine. Or if they go, no, I don't think that's right, I think you can still do it this way, is to go, well, let's try it doing it that way.
Right.
Or merging the 2 thought patterns together into one rule, so you kind of hit both points.
Yeah.
And then you do that. And then the other stuff is just people come back from blind play testing, going on about, I don't think the army should have this in it, I think the army should have that in it. And a lot of people are more knowledgeable than you, me about certain things. You go, oh, okay, I didn't know. I mean, I'm quite lucky is that I'll be playing a game shortly with the good old Harry Sidebottom, who's written quite a few. He knows it's getting people that know their stuff, and then presenting it to them, and then taking on board what they say. Not necessarily all the time. You might go, I disagree. For instance, we might have vehement disagreements over what ophismos and all that kind of rubbish is in ancient combat about a so-called push. I just think, sorry, that's just garbage. People don't fight like that and would never have fought like that, and that's fine, isn't it? You have to accept the fact that that's my interpretation that we use. But on the whole, if it's people are of a lot of experience in the field, then you try to mould what they've had to say into the rule systems.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, at this point, then now you say it's gone out to the various play testers, blind play testers. Do you think then you said you've written the rules? Do you think there is going to be much scope then for those rules changing dramatically, or do you think it's just going to be like little bits and pieces?
It'll be the latter. It's the basics. We've had kind of a year and a half to almost 2 years of play testing. Basic rules, and they work. So you think, I'm reasonably happy. Unless something hideous comes out of the equation, but hopefully it won't. Normally it's just things like, that didn't feel right, or this didn't feel right, and I'm not sure why. And again, you just go through the same process. We just tweak this. Also, most people in Ancients, it's about wheeling and all that sort of stuff. So it's about writing rules that simplify all those sort of mechanics, but without making them ridiculous, so that your Roman legions aren't roaring across the battlefield doing 180-degree turns every 3 seconds. As long as they feel it's about right, then you've got it. And that's what normally comes back. It's just, it'll be a bit of tweaking, a bit of polishing, as opposed to rewriting the whole thing.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and have you got a release? I'm assuming you haven't got a release date for those at this point, have you? It's probably still too early for that, isn't it?
It'll be post COP 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So obviously, COP 2 is the big thing at the moment, the big main thing. That's it. And sorry, there are so many things there I could say about Richard and Israel. I won't. It's so obvious.
Yeah, I'd like to keep my monetization on this video.
That's right. Once he's finished,
don't want the perma ban on YouTube.
We can. We'll crack on from there. So so I'm not sure. There's never a time limit to it because you're never exactly too sure. But that's basically the I think.
There's no point putting that pressure on yourself anyway. They appear when they appear. So then quickly to go back to both GDA and also to O Group, we'll just wrap up here really, I guess, with what future supplements can we expect to see for both of those? I know there's been a few out for O Group already. Is there any more in the pipeline?
So O Group's got the Western Desert supplement, which is 7 scenarios, all linked. That's done. Again, that just sits in the Mr. Clark's job list until he's ready to rock and roll with those. And the GDA ones are exactly the same. There are, I think, 6 General de Brigade scenario books, plus all the GDA bite-sized type campaign booklets, and they've all been pushed into one document, which may come out as one, or we might split certain scenarios. But that's potentially, and plus some new ones, that's potentially 80 scenarios, and they've all had notes as to how to play them with GDA 2.
Oh, okay.
Everyone's been kind of updated,
right?
Given a page of notes and say, it's do this, do that, etc., etc., etc. So it's those two at the moment. You've got a big GDA scenario booklet and Western Desert O Group.
Okay, so two pretty big releases coming at some points in the future when COP 2 has been and gone. So that's kind of holding up the filter at the moment, isn't it? For
that's just like anything, isn't it? It's everything has to go through Richard, which is fair enough, and you'll get those done as and when. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Is there anything else you wanted to add here, and David? You got anything else you wanted to say about any more writing you're doing? Any teasers you can give us, if there's any?
No, I'm just so I'm just too busy doing it all. Isn't it? Doing all the GDA stuff, which hopefully you think, right, once we get those scenarios out, that'll be it. And then obviously there's O Group. The next step after the Western Desert might be the Far East, but that will probably be on quite a bit on the back burner until all the ancient stuff, because obviously if you release a set of ancient rules, you're going to need to support it, so that will sit probably up front for a little while before I can even get the time to do anything else.
Well, I'd certainly be a big fan of anything Far East O Group. If that was in the pipeline at some point, I'll hold my breath though for when it comes out. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Dave. I think we'll leave it at that. We've had a good hour chat, and I think there's some good, interesting things in there. It's nice to hear it from a rules designer point of view, really, just how you go about doing these things and where you draw from when it comes to, and as I say, to go back to the historical side of things, I really see that history underpinning the both sets of those rules, and I appreciate it for that. So I'll thank you very much for watching, everybody, and thanks again to you, Dave, and I will see you all. We'll see you in the next Storm of Steel video.
Cheerio.